Hey everyone, I have the workout review for the VO2 max FTP microintervals. I've got Frank up here, and you can tell from his workout towel he has an orange instead of green, which means he did go a little bit long, which is always totally fine, or usually totally fine. In this case, we can look at his workout and see what he did. And let's see, actually, let me close this for a second. Just looking at the planned versus completed stats. Oops. So we planned to do an hour and a half, and he did 222. Planned TSS was 76, and he had 104. So definitely more than intended, but that's okay. And we're going to see how he did that. We also had a planned intensity factor of 0.71 because originally the workout was an hour and a half, and we had the 2 by 10 minutes of the micro interval. So it's a little bit more intense of an interval format, which raises the intensity factor a little bit if you're not doing anything else that's different in the ride. But his intensity factor is 0.66. So we can tell that while he extended the ride, he didn't extend the intervals, which is good. He just added endurance time at a lower intensity. And that's what we can see if we look at analyze here. We can actually see that he executed the workout and then just added on some endurance time afterwards. So that was good. I'm gonna, after I walk through the workout, I'm gonna hide the blue workout, the structured workout behind here. So we had the fast pedals, a little bit of endurance time, and then 2 by 10 minutes of 30-30s, where we're going 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy. And I really, it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. The idea is that you're finishing the interval and able to finish the 2 intervals. But sometimes you'll see here, he's under target, and sometimes he's over target, and sometimes he's right in range. And so that's great. I mean, it really depends on how many times you've done this workout format. If you're doing it outside, could be some variations in terrain. If you're doing it inside, it's a little bit easier to get these pretty consistent once you dial in on your target power. So I am going to hide the workout. So we can just look at power right now. I'm actually going to smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so we can see that the power looks fairly similar for the 2 10-minute intervals. The reason, so let's look at the average for the first interval for almost 10 minutes was a normalized power of 132 watts. If I look at the second one, I'm just going to drag it over. And the normalized power was 139 watts. So it's actually 7 watts higher on the second set. That tells me he did a better job of executing the second set. With these 30-30, so the idea is that we are going hard and easy to allow you to get that 10 minutes of higher average or higher normalized power while still keeping your heart rate up. The 30 seconds in between the 30 seconds hard is not that much time to recover. When we do true micro intervals, we tend to do a 40 seconds on, 20 seconds easy, and that 20 seconds doesn't give you much time to recover at all. So your heart rate stays elevated, which is what we want when we're trying to drive this response in our VO2 max. Now, the alternative is we can do, let's say, 5-minute continuous intervals or 4-minute continuous intervals where you start hard and you just stay hard and you don't recover until the end of that continuous interval. And those are good too. And we also have those coming up in our plan. But the micro interval format that allows you to go hard and easy does a couple different things. So one, it does raise your heart rate up, and the 30-second recovery in between allows for equal recovery time between the intervals and between the surges, let's say. So it's not as ideal as the 40-20, but it's still a really good response. You can tell if you did this workout, it was hard, right? But not so hard that you couldn't do it. You were getting those little bits of recovery. Now, in the 30 seconds that you're going hard, you can push higher watts than you can if you were doing a continuous interval. So that's twofold. One, we are able to still have an average or normalized power over that 10-minute interval, that's pretty high. And potentially higher than you could have held that average power for 10 minutes without doing the on-off or micro interval type of format. So that's good. The other advantage is it forces us to make power in a different way. If you think about how you would pedal and what sort of gearing and cadence and all that you would use and what power you would be putting out, if you were doing a continuous interval versus this micro interval format, you know that you're pedaling harder for those 30 seconds. It might be bigger gear, so bigger, higher force, higher cadence intervals to get these higher watts, which is actually pretty beneficial if you think about it for gravel racing and for any sort of off-road racing but also in cycling, just when you need the ability to be able to surge hard and recruit all that muscle very quickly and then recover. So it has the cardiovascular response that we're looking for, and it also has the neuromuscular response. So it's pretty cool, and it's a fun workout format. Okay, now I want to go back and talk about heart rate. So I'm going to show that on the screen. And okay, not sure what's happening with this blue box here. So you can see the heart rate for the second interval was significantly higher. If I drag my cursor over the first interval, the average heart rate was 133. And for the second one, the average heart rate was 143. So what's happening here? I had already mentioned it looked like higher watts on the second interval means he had better execution. 10 beats higher in the heart rate, better execution, because we are looking for that high heart rate response for VO2 max intervals specifically. In these micro intervals, we don't want your heart rate to be able to come down too much to recover too much, so you are getting that cardiovascular response or the internal strain. So higher power now, higher heart rate, that totally makes sense, right? So what is it that Frank did to improve the execution of the second interval set? Let's look at cadence. Remember, with higher cadence, your heart rate goes up. It's going to be really hard to see with all these colors on the screen. So let's hide the others for now. So cadence is the yellow line. And this is being really slow. Okay, and I'm actually going to show heart rate again. So you can see what is driving the better execution of the intervals is the higher cadence. You can see here on the first interval, see how his cadence is super low and it's even dropping as the interval goes on. He tries to get it back up, and then you see his heart rate go up. So the heart rate is a trailing response, a trailing indicator. He's trying to make more power by using his cadence, which is excellent. That's what we want to do. And then in the second interval, you see he did that right away. So he used higher cadence. It dropped a little bit here and he tried to get it back here. But you can see how his heart rate was responding to that. And you also saw how the power responded. So he was able to get, I think 9 more watts or 7 more watts of normalized power, 10 beats higher heart rate, just by changing his cadence. So that's your lesson for these. As we get closer to the race and we start doing this more intensive work with the micro intervals, with the VO2 max intervals, really, really, really try to focus on keeping your cadence higher. It might feel uncomfortable. It's going to raise your breathing rate, your respiratory rate, your heart rate, and your mind is going to tell you to back off because that signal is uncomfortable. It's a fatigue signal, and it's also it's just like a warning signal to your brain when, you know, it needs oxygen and it's uncomfortable to be breathing that hard and to have your heart beating that fast. But if you can intentionally use your cadence to be in the target zone, always use RPE too, your perceived effort. I think you'll have a better response in these intervals if you can work on that faster cadence. So, the alternative is lower cadence. Maybe you hit the power. You're probably not going to hit the power as consistently with the lower cadence because your legs are going to fatigue first. So your cadence is going to be low, your heart rate's going to be lower, and then your power is probably not going to be able to stay as consistent. Okay. All right. Well, have a great week.